some complaints by local children being molested in his home. Well, when they went into his home, they did find a number of articles relating to Nazi belief systems, symbologies, symbols, things of this nature, but they also found something else. Colonel Aquino is head of what is known as the Temple of Set. The Temple of Set is actually a spin-off church of the Church of Satan. Like Heinrich Himmler was researching, and by the way, Heinrich Himmler is his hero. Heinrich Himmler was studying the black arts and trying to understand more about the effect on the person's mind that is exposed to these blood rituals and sort of thing. What, amazingly enough, Colonel Aquino found out that this was a wonderful trauma base for controlling people's minds. Kathy O'Brien and her daughter both had unfortunately, a great deal of exposure to Michael Aquino, and we have a number of people in the United States military who have stepped forward and provided credible testimony to support her her findings and statements and testimony before federal agents. It's unusual, and I must tell you this, Michael Aquino has sued, he's a litigant, he has sued everyone who has ever attacked him in a publication, or on radio, or on television. And he, in some of his lawsuits, have been quite successful. We are the only exception. The reason being is because if he would sue us, we could take him to court with hard proof of his abuses of Kathy and her daughter. And of course, this is the same situation that exists with George Bush and some of the others. But Michael Aquino had a book written around him, and I'll read you something, and it says, what most people don't know, and what U.S. law enforcement officers are only beginning to discover, is that Satanism is the fastest growing underground criminal movement in the world today, and that it is directly linked to an exploding number of child abuse cases, Nazism, drug dealing, pornography, and prostitution. Now, this sounds very familiar because this is exactly what Kathy O'Brien has been talking about. Linda Blood is a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, we are mentioned in her book several times. This New Satanist, it came out last year by Dell Publishing here in the United States. The CIA did not want it to stay on the market, so they stopped the publication, just as they would have ours had we allowed a publisher to handle it. But this particular book literally rips off the covers of secrecy concerning Michael Aquino's use of Nazism and blood traumas and Satanism to externally control the mind through trauma.
I noticed that in most of this book that you provided me as extra material to your book, we are facing a similarity between Nazis and Nazi Germany and the United States today, or George Bush, World War order. In all this material, is it coincidence, or you believe that's formally like that?
I believe, like many intelligence officers believe, and many federal officers believe, who are associated closely with the mechanism in Washington, that Nazism is alive and well in this country because it was just simply exported from Germany in the 40s. I'm adamant to say that I don't believe Nazism ever died. I just think it was resurrected over here because as our conversations earlier in the day concerning Project Paperclip have proven, that we imported all these scientists with all these ideas and how to create chaos in a society, and they have done an excellent job.
What other materials are you providing us as well?
There's a great number of bodies of research concerning Himmler's use of people in human experiments to create the perfect proverbial Manchurian candidate. All of this research has been actually collected by a number of top-notch physicians and lawyers around this country. I've been very privileged to have been a part of contributing from my experience in the 60s and the 70s working for the Defense Department and being associated with the project known as MK Ultra, which is, of course, the United States government's code name for the mind control experiments. In addition to that, there are, and this is some of the lawyers' briefs about what they have discovered so far as the secret government goes in our country that is actually undermining the efforts of every good person in this country. The Mormon Church, of course, is highly affected, much like the Catholics are, because their belief systems have actually been. Here's an article here. Top Mormon officials probe member allegations of satanic abuse. The Mormon Church is literally under fire right now because they're claiming that better than 60% of the children in the Mormon Church in some way or another have been sexually and psychologically abused in their daycare settings and other church-sponsored functions. It's really it's reached a point now of epidemic stage in this country. You know, Vuk, in 1980 there were 200 cases of this dissociative identity disorder that the American Psychiatric and American Psychological Associations had actually published. There were 200 reported cases. In 1990, there were 250,000 cases reported in this country. And in 1995, 2.5 million cases reported.
Child abuse?
No, multiple personality disorder, or what is known as dissociative identity disorder. That's what Kathy O'Brien and her daughter suffered from.
Anything anywhere publicly, numbers that you were mentioning now? Do you have any quotation from that magazine, scientific magazine?
Yes, the American Psychiatric Association is the one who compiled these figures from their group of participating psychiatrists across the United States, and actually Canada too is included in those studies.
I could understand logically putting all these facts and knowledges together that we're talking now about mind control operation on a big scale in the United States,
yes,
which is scaring me.
Yes.
Is that what you want to say?
It's very scary, yes sir, and it is big in terms of numbers because, Vuk, when you're talking about 2.5 million people, and the estimates are that only 1 in 10 are actually seen and diagnosed, you're talking about 20 to 25 million people. That constitutes a sizable portion of the United States with a serious psychological problem. Serious. Those kind of people are capable of becoming serial killers. They usually suicide themselves at very young ages. They themselves will be child abusers. They'll abuse their own children and not even know they're doing it. It becomes autogenic behavior. In other words, it's just a knee-jerk response system. In addition to that, you asked me a question. You said, is Kathy O'Brien the first person that has ever come forward? The answer to you then was no. There's been many, but only one has ever been considered completely put together and competent and had her case documented as well as Kathy's. And that was a lady by the name of Candy Jones. Candy Jones, this is a copy of a book that was published in 1976, I believe. And Candy Jones, let's see. Well, yeah, 1976, excuse me. Candy Jones was used by the CIA as a prostitute, as a mind control prostitute. She had suffered sexual abuse as a child. Her husband was a prominent radio announcer in New York, and his name was Long John Neville. And Mr. Neville was quite successful in enlisting the services of friends within the intelligence community who actually persuaded the CIA to admit that they had been using this woman as a proverbial Manchurian candidate or a mind control slave. Well, other than Candy Jones, no one else the CIA has ever admitted doing this to. Even though they were caught in Canada in the early 70s, or actually late 60s, they were caught using a psychiatrist they were paying, the CIA was paying, to torture individuals at a particular mental hospital in Montreal. Dr. Ewan Cameron. By the way, it should be noted that Dr. Cameron was the original founder of the American Psychiatric Association and was the man that our head of the intelligence community, Alan Dulles, in the 50s, put into the position of being in control of MK-Ultra. So mind control is not new in this country or any other country. It's been around for thousands of years. But the sophistication of it to this point has now reached such a proportion that people are seeing the results everywhere, but they don't see is the sophistication of the mind control itself. They don't recognize the symptoms that are being created in these people until it's too late. Walter Bauer, a fellow friend and researcher, wrote a book in 1978 called Operation Mind Control. Walter did perhaps one of the best bodies of research that has ever been provided, but unfortunately Walter allowed Dell Publishing Company to print his book, and the CIA, although they paid him quite well for it, bought all the copies up off the shelves and bought the rights to the book from Dell and took it off the market, because this information was much, much, much too powerful to be released into the private sector.
What's happened to him later on? He was
Walter himself had become a victim as a result of his research into this. The CIA had administered a very powerful drug to him and hurt Walter a great deal. But Walter has since recovered and continues his research.
What was happened to him? You know him personally, so you
yes,
know what kind of drugs they gave him?
They gave him a drug called ibogaine. Ibogaine is an extract from a vine that comes out of Brazil. And ibogaine produces characteristically a type of delusional behavior consistent with someone who is clinically insane for all practical purposes. And they will have good days and they'll have bad days. Walter had been affected for over 44 days.
But I mean, he was married to the woman that was
yes, he was
family
married into the Mellon banking family. That same Mellon banking family, by the way, is one of the most powerful banking families in the entire world, and was originally put together with the Rockefellers, and they've been implicated in practically every money laundering scandal that this country's ever known, particularly involving George Bush and his drugs and the CIA.
So the bank is closed right away, right?
Oh, no.
No?
It's one of the most prominent banks in the world and remains such today. And he has to divorce this woman because the bank was actually covered up for the CIA. Is that correct information? He was divorced, and any money that he had had as a result of that relationship is gone. They took it away from him and left him penniless. I got reports from all over the world. Dr. Hans Gruber, himself a physician, or Hans Greitz rather, is indeed a victim of mind control by a cooperative effort of the KGB and the CIA. And he also has thrown another one into the mix called the Shabak, which is the Iranian intelligence gathering group. Dr. Greitz has been in touch with Walter Bauer and myself and some of the other avid researchers in this country for a number of years now. He himself is in a state of recovery. Unfortunately, in Germany, this disorder is not even recognized as being real. If you have it, they'll say that you have something else. They do not allow anything to be written on mind control. They do not allow anything to be published on government abuse of external control of the mind.